In lesson 29, we're going to look at Pythagorean triples and radical expressions. So to start, what is a Pythagorean triple? Well, in a squared plus b squared equals c squared, or Pythagorean theorem, a Pythagorean triple is when the a, b, and c are all whole numbers. For example, if you had 5 squared plus 12 squared equals 13 squared, the a is a whole number, 5, b is 12 whole number, c is 13. And if you solved it out, it would be 25 plus 144, and that would equal 169. Another one, notice these are all whole numbers, and if you solve them, 3 squared 9 plus 4 squared 16 equals 25, which is 5 squared. But that is an example of Pythagorean triple. So in example 1, it says find the unknown length in the triangle, and then it wants to know if the sides form a Pythagorean triple. So we do Pythagorean theorem to find x. Two legs are 15 and 20, and then our hypotenuse is x, so it goes in the C spot. So we do 15 squared is 225, 20 squared is 400, and then we add those together to get 625. And now we square root, and the square root of 625 is 25. So we found our missing side length of 25 centimeters. So that was phase 1. Now do the sides form a Pythagorean triple? Well, since x is 25 and all the other numbers are whole numbers, therefore, since they're all whole numbers, yes, they do form a Pythagorean triple. And that's how you do those types of problems. Now let's look at simplified radical expressions, or really just radical expressions. In example 3, I'll just teach this by doing an example. It says find x. Give your answer in simplified radical form. It doesn't want a decimal, it doesn't want, and it won't be a whole number. So first thing is, let's set up Pythagorean theorem. 6 squared plus 12 squared equals x squared. Simplify, 36 plus 144 equals x squared. Add 36 plus 144 to get 180. Alright. Now from here, when we square root both of these, we're left with x equals square root of 180. Now if I put, now I can check to see if it is a whole number. I put second radical 180, or sorry, I put radical 180 in my calculator, and it's a decimal. It's not a whole number. So therefore, what we need to do is simplify square root of 180. How do we do that? Well, I'm going to take it over here, and what we have to do to simplify the radical expression is we have to find factors of 180. Whatever the number is, you got to find factors. A factor is two numbers that multiply to be the number above. It's kind of like its family tree. So in 180, what are two numbers that can multiply to be 180? Well, we could do 10 and 18. There's not a wrong answer unless it doesn't multiply to be 180. But if it does, there's not a wrong answer. It's not a wrong order. Well, we get 10 and 18. We're trying to get it all the way down to prime numbers. Is 10 prime? Nope. Remember, prime number is multiply 1 in itself, but this one has 5 times 2. Is 5 a prime number? Yes, it is. And is 2 a prime number? Yes, it is. So I'm going to circle these. And we'll come back to those in a second. Look at 18. It can be multiplied by 2 and 9. Well, 2 is a prime number. I can circle that one. 9 is not. It still has 3 and 3. Now those are prime numbers, so this is what we're left with. Now from this point, so if I said, if I multiplied all of its prime numbers, they would equal 180. 5 times 2, 10, times 2, 20, times 3, 60, times 3, 180. Now what we want to do here though, is we're going to write these, remember this is a radical 180. So I'm going to write this like so. Radical 5 times radical 2 times radical 2 times radical 3 times radical 3. And those equal radical 180. Once I get to this point, I'm going to find two numbers that are alike. If I have two that are alike, if I have radical 3 times radical 3, the answer will always be the whole number, just 3. Because if I take radical 3 times radical 3, that equals radical 9. Well, the square root of 9 is 3. So I can take these and turn that into a 3. Now I'm left with radical 5, radical 2, radical 2. I have two of the same here. So I take these two, can cross those out and just turn that into a 2. So I'm going to, and what that's going to do is 2 times 3, radical 5. 2 times 3, radical 5. And now we can simplify. 2 times 3, it's 6. And then you bring the radical 5 with it, so 6 radical 5 would be your simplified answer. That would be x. So we just solve for a. Now let's look at another example. Same instructions. Solve for x, simplify the radical. So we start with Pythagorean theorem. 5 squared plus x squared equals our hypotenuse, 10 squared. 5 squared is 25, 10 squared is 100. Alright, and that leaves us with, subtract 25, 75 equals x squared, square root, so we are at x equals square root of 75. That's where we're at, and now we got to do, we're going to talk about simplify the radical 75. So we got to find factors of radical 75. So what two numbers multiply to be 75? Two numbers I can think of are 25 and 3. Alright? 3 is a prime number, so I'm going to circle it. 5 is not, it has factors of 5 and 5. Now from this point, what you can do, instead of writing it all out, like we did in the last one, radical 3, radical 5, radical 5, and getting to this point, I'm just going to circle these two since I know they're the same, and know that that becomes a 5, radical 3. Square root of 5 to square root of 5 would be square root of 25, and that would be 5. So our simplified radical answer for x would be 5 radical 3. So you can kind of shorten it a little bit once you get the hang of doing radicals. But that's how you do radical expressions and Pythagorean triples.